Real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Father Werewolf and Son. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I recently saw an episode on your channel about a big werewolf or a dogman walking with a young one. So I'm quite excited to see that another person has had this kind of an experience. I was treated like I was crazy for years by my family. In fact, I don't expect this to change anything as far as they go. But I am grateful for the validation at least. So now I'm going to tell you about what happened to me. I hope you take it as a warning or a cautionary tale in case you see something strange yourself. Be very careful who you share this information with, or you could be putting roadblocks up to prevent your own future happiness and success. There was a kid I was best friends with for a while who I used to call Kirk, because he was a leader type of guy like Captain Kirk. Later, his family fell apart and he ended up in a mental facility. It was really sad. Having cruddy parents can actually ruin your life and drive you insane. I saw it happen to Kirk. Used to be really outgoing in the life of every class and game and party. After his parents started suing his siblings with frivolous lawsuits to deliberately drive their own offspring into poverty, Kirk became withdrawn and unsure of himself. All of his confidence was gone once he realized his family were such low animals. He felt ashamed, as if it were he who had performed the inexcusable acts of his parents. After not very long, it drove him bonkers. Not the fun kind of bonkers either, I mean the serious kind, where he's never been let out of that facility since. So before I even tell you my story, you already know that my only other witness is literally in an insane asylum. So I don't blame you if you want to join my family in calling me as crazy as my fellow witness Kirk. With all of that out of the way, I will now begin to try to tell you the story both for myself and for my friend Kirk, who sadly can't be among us to speak for himself. I was 18 when this happened, and Kirk had just turned 19 shortly prior. I remember because he had a flip phone with him, which back then was a new kind of cell phone. This was before iPhones and smartphones, but it did take pictures. The coolest part about those cell phones was that they would flip open, like the Captain Kirk TV communicators. My friend Kirk did it just like second season Kirk on TV. Look in one direction dramatically, flip the phone open casually with one hand without looking. So this was an event in our lives. Kirk finally had his communicator. I myself didn't have a cell phone yet. Anyway, that means it had to have been early or mid-November when this happened, since Kirk was born 2 days after Halloween. The year I am certain was 1999. Because Kirk and I were both scared of that year. We had heard stories that it was going to be the end of time or the end of civilization. Well, maybe that last part is turning out to be true. But anyway, we were very conscious that it was the year 1999 while this was all going down. The two of us had decided to spend the weekend hiking and camping around the Kincaid Woods area in Boonton, New Jersey. That's right, I said New Jersey, not Pennsylvania. Anyway, we drove out to the end of Powerville Road, parked the used car my mother had given me for my previous birthday, and started walking into the woodline. That night we stayed up after dark telling scary stories for a while. But I got tired early and I went into our tent to crash. After a while, Kirk came in and woke me up, saying there was something I had to see outside. I got up and went out into the chilly night with him, but whatever had been there was gone. I asked him what he had seen, but he was too embarrassed to say, and he told me it might have been an optical illusion or something. I remember I kind of got annoyed at him, and I tried to go back to sleep, but now my feet were cold and sleeping was impossible. Eventually I just decided to get up a little bit before dawn and get started on my day. It was about then that Kirk finally went inside the tent to crash out. He was snoring almost immediately, and when I heard the sound, at first I thought that's what it was, snoring. By the sound, I mean the sound of the adult dogman or werewolf or whatever that was. It made a few noises, but they were each sort of timed to the snoring of my friend inside the tent, so I was laughing at the bizarre snoring that Kirk was doing. I wasn't even noticing that anyone else was there until I turned and saw the two of them. Almost immediately, I felt my stomach drop because I was thinking this had to have been what Kirk woke me up about earlier. It was still mostly dark when I was seeing them, but it had to have been close to pitch blackout when Kirk had. As much as he was unsure about what he was seeing, that's how much I was sure. No, it wasn't the noonday sun, it was still very early, but it was just light enough, and they were just dark enough, that they were easy to make out in silhouette. And they had these glowing eyes that made them appear to have risen up from hell itself. These were monsters I was seeing, and the only thing keeping me from fainting dead away was that they were walking perpendicular to me, from my right to my left, and I didn't think they had seen me. I couldn't be sure at the time that they were even interested in me. They were very interested in each other, but not in me. The first thing I can think of to compare this scene to is a parent walking their kid to kindergarten or first grade. There was a big, hairy monster, like a Bigfoot, only with a dog face, and he was holding hands with this cute little creature that looked like a real-life charcoal black-colored teddy bear. It was a big werewolf and a teddy bear walking through the woods together. I didn't know what species those were, but I figured they must be some kind of bear with pointed ears that walks upright. I snuck into the tent as quietly as I could, and I woke Kirk up, telling him to be quiet. When I went back outside, he followed me, and then the two of us stood there for a while, transfixed, as we got to witness two of the rarest creatures in all the world walk along like they were on their way to the school bus. The big one was a male, not a female as I had first assumed when I saw it leading the little one. No, this was a male, even in silhouette. I could clearly see that. If it was a bear, it must have had mange, as its chest and belly had no hair on them as far as I could see. It looked like he hit the gym a lot, and there was no body fat on this guy at all. On the adult, I mean. The kid was a little round furball on legs, as I remembered. You almost wanted to say, "Aw," when you saw him. Or her. I mean, who knows? That was a moment I still have dreams about. I wake up into those dreams as though I were really there, in those woods. When it happened, I was scared. My stomach hurt. My feet were cold, and I was afraid I was going to pee on myself. In the dreams, though, it's like the perfect immersive virtual reality replay, where I'm no longer scared or uncomfortable, and I can just study the creatures and enjoy the once-in-a-lifetime privilege of getting to witness something like that. When I look at Kirk in those dreams, though, everything goes wrong. I remember that was the last weekend we got to spend with each other, before his family imploded through controlled demolition, carried out by his parents against him and his siblings. I also remember how Kirk ruined our last perfect moment, and I remember how he did it. The cell phone. The Captain Kirk flip phone. That was what started everything rolling downhill, both on that night and in Kirk's life in general. And how could a flip phone destroy an entire life, you ask? Well, Kirk took his out and tried to take a flash photo of the two upright hairy creatures walking by. Those of you who are my age or older may remember that the cameras on those old flip phones took tiny photos, 640 by 480, and they really needed to be taken in a bright location to have anything come out at all. The exposure time was usually so long that it was very hard not to get blurred images, and the flash did not flash very far at all. So when Kirk took his flash photo, the flash lit up some tall grass and a flying bug in front of him, while everything else in the photo came out a dark, muddy, splotchy brown. We wouldn't learn that until later, because the two of us suddenly had something far more pressing to deal with. Now, while that flash did not extend far enough to light up the two creatures, it did get noticed by the two werewolves, and they both turned and saw us. I was watching the big giant one. It looked like the most muscular man ever, but it also looked tired, as though being a father were taking every ounce of its strength every single day. Parts of its fur looked normal, but other parts looked mangy and straggly. Still, he had to have been 10 feet tall if he was an inch, and I began wondering how fast he could run at me if I turned tail right then and made a break for it. None of that ended up mattering though. The big dog-headed werewolf monster never did anything except stand there and stare at us. The cute little son that looked like a teddy bear though, he charged at us, making this sound that was like a whine half the time and sort of like chittering the rest of the time. He reminded me of that little fetish doll from that old Karen Black TV movie from the 70s, except he wasn't carrying a spear. He was equipped with teeth and claws. Even so, he had looked so small and cute next to the Dogman that I didn't immediately react to his charging at us. The little guy was mostly running on 2 legs, but he would drop down to leap over rocks and roots in his way, and at one point I saw him grab onto a tree trunk and swing around it. Now, I didn't see it do that with hands. I saw it do that with long curved claws that reminded me of grappling hooks. It had a series of 3 or 4 little Wolverine adamantium-looking claws that it could swing from, and they looked long and sharp enough to tear my guts open. Couple that with the fact that a creature who looked tiny next to a huge Dogman didn't look so small anymore once it started getting closer to us. I think that thing was probably 4 feet taller when standing up straight, even though he had looked 2 or 3 feet tall walking next to its parent or guardian over there. So it was a delayed reaction, but Kirk and I ran away. We ran away from our own tent, from our own campsite. Once I saw those claws, I didn't think I'd be safe inside the tent. So I ran, and so did Kirk. At first we ran together, me and my friend. Every so often I'd turn and find that smaller creature still on our tail. He never seemed to catch up, but he never lagged back either. The sounds he was making were scarier than any animal sounds I'd ever heard. He didn't seem like he was fooling around. We had, or Kirk's camera had, really ticked this little guy off, and he was looking to get even, plus more. I remember looking over my shoulder and seeing the creepy monster slice a branch thicker than my fingers off a tree without even putting much muscle into it. I didn't want to think what those grappling hooks might be able to do to me, and I guarantee you that I ran faster than I ever had before. At some point, Kirk and I became separated, which proved to be good luck for me and bad luck for Kirk. The creature chased Kirk all the way to his home, and I've always felt that the trauma caused by that led into his later breakdown. He might have been able to handle the evil machinations of his parents if he hadn't been heading into it broke and coping with trauma that he wasn't even allowed to talk to anyone about. The few times he was honest about the Dogman, he got emotionally abused in return. It wasn't really fair for Kirk, and that was how I learned that life is not fair. A lesson learned from a little baby teddy bear Dogman.
Find that link in the description, honey.
Baby Werewolf is my friend. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I like your channel because you don't only have stories about dogmen that are scary, but also nice dogmen or baby dogmen and sometimes even other kinds of monsters too. I am originally from Japan, and this kind of thinking about monsters is even more prevalent there than here in America. But I'm not only talking about cartoon monsters like Pokemon and so forth. I mean to say that some dogmen and Bigfoot are ravenous beasts who will kill and eat you, but others are more predisposed to behaving kindly toward humans. This is especially true of dogmen who are friendly toward humans while they're still puppies. I have had the joy of getting to know a werewolf pup who should basically be a young adult if and when I get to see him again this spring or summer. He should be 4 years old this year, roughly speaking, and so I'm excited to see if he is as tall or taller than me if and when I see him again. It would give us an idea of how fast a dogman grows up. I had thought they grew more like human beings, but Seems they sprout up much more quickly like dogs do. I wonder if that also means their life expectancy would be shorter than humans as well. If I'm lucky, I might be able to begin to learn the answers to those kinds of questions. The sobering aspect of this, though, is that I don't know if I will get to see the Dogman pup again. For that reason, I've been going over the past few years and what I've learned, and I've written it up into a very short version for you and your audience. It doesn't have violence or anything in it, so I think it should work for your main channel. This was 2021 in the middle of the summer, and I had just moved to Ohio of all places. I had moved to San Francisco just before the pandemic started for a job, and I had been wanting to move to the country ever since, just to avoid everything that was happening. When a job opened up working in Columbus, Ohio, I took it because it came with a company house in the country. These days I mostly work from home in the country, and I hope I can keep extending my work visa and stay here indefinitely. Now, I know Ohio is not a state most people associate with the Dogman, but my home is in the woods midway between Columbus and Pittsburgh. Now, Pittsburgh is in western Pennsylvania, and that is an area known for Dogman and Bigfoot reports. Where I live is not far from the Wayne National Forest, and in the summer, I see this young Dogman playing behind my house. The first time I saw him, he was a puppy. He walked on all fours. He was like any other dog, and I loved him immediately. I couldn't find his family, either human or canine, so I brought him inside. He was so friendly that I figured he must belong to someone. He certainly wasn't afraid of people. The next morning I brought him to a local park ranger station I had driven past, and I explained the situation to them. I wasn't sure how things were done in Ohio, but I wanted to know if there was some way to reunite this puppy with his family. They told me that since the puppy had no collar or tags, and since it seemed to have no implanted identification either, I could maybe post flyers on phone poles around where I found them. They pointed out to me that he had tics and mentioned he might be wild and separated from his dog pack. I asked if there might be a way to reunite him with his pack, and the older ranger told me that sometimes the pack will get violent with a person who takes in one of their stray pups. Other times the packs can get violent with the pup. His advice was either to keep the dog or give it away, but not to expect it to be able to go back to the wild. Not now that it had the scent of human on it. That's what the old man told me. However, that night, the pup disappeared from my house. He had dug a tunnel out of my basement laundry room. He tunneled like a rat behind my washer-dryer, and somehow escaped before I got up the next morning. I figured that was the last I would see or hear from him. A few days later, when I was barbecuing out back American style, I was very surprised when the pup walked up right behind me, begging for meat. He was on his hind legs, holding his paws out in front of him, and he was so charming that I had to toss him some scraps. He danced for his dinner. It was very cute. This little dancing dog came back for food but lived in the woods. Everything the ranger had said was wrong. He had no trouble at all going back to living in the woods. I don't think he was running with a pack either. I think he was one lone pup out in the forest alone. I called him Sparky, and I still do. I named him before I realized he was a Dogman. In those early days, I thought that his walking on his hind legs and dancing for scraps was, just a trick he did to get extra food. He hadn't yet begun to take on any of the humanoid look that the Dogman body seems to adapt to as it ages into adulthood. The puppy disappeared one night as winter was coming on, and I searched for days. I was heartbroken as I thought I'd lost him forever. However, on the first warm day of spring, Sparky came home for the summer. Now that I think back on it, I don't think I noticed in his second year that he was a Dogman either, but he was walking upright half the time. I just called it his little trick. I didn't think too much about it. When Sparky left again that winter, I was sad, but I only searched around half-heartedly. I don't know if he goes somewhere to hibernate or if he walks south for the winter or what, but I know he will come back in the spring, and I just have to miss him until then. Last spring when Sparky returned, he was 5 feet tall when standing up on his hind legs. He was standing up nearly all the time by then. His paws had developed into these sort of short-fingered hands, and he had figured out how to turn doorknobs and open the refrigerator. Give an intelligent dog a digit that functions like a thumb, and scary things start to happen. It was like I had a roommate more than a pet dog. I don't really know for certain if he's going to come back in spring of 2024 or not. If he does, will he be taller than I am? I'm a little nervous about it. At the same time, I'm trying to brace myself in case he doesn't come back at all. Maybe he's off with a new family by now, I don't know. I hope he will continue to consider me his friend, because I've spent the past 3 years very proud to be able to say that. Baby Werewolf is my friend. I raised a Dogman Bigfoot hybrid. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I can't really explain who I am or even where I am, but I am going to tell you about what I've been doing. You see, I rescued an abandoned baby animal, and it seems to be a hybrid of a Bigfoot with some kind of pointy-eared canine. I do believe I've spent the past 5 years raising a hybrid creature whose mother was a Sasquatch, but whose father was a Dogman or something in that nature. Let me go back to the beginning and tell it in order. I have a job that calls for me to be in nature, and that's all I'm going to say about that, because if I said more, I would get myself fired, and the creature would likely be captured and experimented upon. They'd also discredit me, at the least. Maybe they'd even go to greater lengths than that to keep me quiet about this. I really don't know. At any rate, I'll tell you as much as I can. I saw the mother of my animal friend leaving the woods, carrying her other baby Bigfoot on her shoulder as she left. She was the first Squatch I had seen in my 18 or 19 months on this job, but it was the second time I'd seen her. The first time she was weighted down with a pregnancy that looked quite painful. Her abdomen was distended to a degree that I've never seen before in any childbearing beast or human. The baby she was carrying away with her did not look large enough to have caused all that, so I wondered if there had been one or more stillborn babies. Such a thing, if handled by the right scientists, could end up being proof of Bigfoot as a species. I decided to launch a little personal search and see if I could locate the area where the lady Bigfoot had given birth. I wasn't in those woods more than 2 or 3 minutes when I heard the terrible crying coming from deeper in. It sometimes sounded just like a newborn human screeching for its mother, and I quickened my step to find the source of all that terrible noise. It was, in fact, an abandoned Sasquatch child. When I got a better look at it, I could see that it had ears more like what you might expect on a dog than on a Sasquatch. That is my only theory as to why the mother abandoned it. Maybe the other one was a pure-blood Squatch, while this one brought bad memories back to her. What must the coupling of a male Dogman and a female Bigfoot be like anyway? It's not likely to be very romantic. Was it even consensual? Possibly not, and that might explain why the mother left the poor baby there, crying and starving as soon as he was born. I knew I had to save him, but I also knew that doing so would cost me my career and reputation if I got found out. There was no way I could do it through official channels, because neither Bigfoot nor Dogman officially exists. If I showed up with one animal proving the existence of both, I would get myself into deep trouble, maybe the worst kind of trouble. I honestly don't know why these creatures are kept secret, but I do know that the people who want them secret will do absolutely anything to keep the public from learning the truth. Destroying one man's life, like me, well, that wouldn't even be difficult for them. I don't think I need to elaborate any further on that topic. So I carried the baby, who I have named Fenrir, a giant wolf from Norse mythology, to a stream to clean him off. I brought him home where I prepared and warmed a concoction similar to the milk that wolves feed their youth. I don't know what Bigfoot mothers feed their offspring, so I went with what I did know. I tried to let the baby sleep in the house that first night, but it broke my flat-screen TV, so I had to put a harness on him and tie him up out back instead. I felt bad about it, but I didn't want to let him wander off into the woods for a week or two at least. He was just too young to be on his own yet. Let me hit pause on this and go back to the other cryptid sightings I had in this area, which both happened when I first got here, and were both Dogman or werewolf incidents. I say or werewolf even though I'm a man of science, because in the time I've been here in this location, I've learned to stop thinking that anything is impossible. No, everything is possible. If it's been imagined, it can probably exist, and that's all I'm going to say about that. When I first got here, I think it was my second or third night, I was trying to sleep when I heard a scratching at my window. I figured it was a branch or something and I tried to ignore it, but it kept coming back, more annoying each time. Finally I decided I would go outside and break that offending branch off, so I sat up in bed and took a look out the window to see what exactly the situation was. What I saw was not a branch. It was a dog. It was a dog with glowing eyes. Eyes that widened as much as mine must have when our gazes met and locked. It was a dog all right, but it was standing taller than I can, and it was bending over just to look into my first floor window. It had to have been as big as a bear, but it was definitely not a bear. It was some form of canine. I think I screamed and jumped backward, and that was all the inspiration that the animal man needed to turn and run away as quickly as it could manage. The second time I saw a Dogman out there was when I was driving. I do think it was the same one, but I suppose it might have been a very similar one, possibly a relative. The way that incident went down was this. I had to make a run in my truck to pick up this set of supplies that I get quarterly. The guy didn't call me to say they were ready to receive me until later in the afternoon, so I was heading out there at night. It was a drive through a pretty desolate area, and although I've lived in nature all my life, I was gripped with an alarming feeling of foreboding about making that trip on that night. I thought about calling the guy back and rescheduling for the morning, but I remembered what happened the last time I did that, which was not good, and which would take too long to explain. So I told myself to stop imagining spooky problems that weren't actually there, to hop in the cab of my truck, and to drive through that dark night to go pick up my quarterly supplies. As I sat behind the wheel of my truck, driving down a desolate forest highway, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that tonight was different. I also honestly, for whatever reason, couldn't stop thinking about the Dogman, the one I had seen earlier. I felt like he would be coming back, and this time, he wouldn't be scared of me and run away. This time, he'd be prepared for me. The moonlight spilled through the dense forest canopy, casting fleeting shadows over the winding road. It was a solitary stretch of highway, rarely visited by anyone other than the occasional lost soul. And I was about to become one of them once again. As the minutes ticked by, an eerie silence enveloped the air. The only sounds were the rumbling of my truck's engine and the rapid beating of my heart. I clenched the steering wheel tightly, prepared for whatever lay ahead. The sense of foreboding seemed to intensify with every mile I traveled. A sharp gust of wind swept through the forest, whispering its warnings in the rustling trees. I instinctively tightened my grip on the steering wheel, feeling a shiver run through my entire body. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, as if sensing the imminent danger that lurked in those shadows. And then, as if in response to some sinister cue, I saw it. Racing out from the darkness of the forest, a creature beyond any earthly description emerged onto the road. The wild and feral Dogman, its gnarled and twisted form, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Its glowing yellow-amber eyes burned with a straight-out evil that chilled me to the core. I do think that this was the same creature that I had seen outside my window, but this time he definitely no longer had any fear of humans. Adrenaline coursed through my veins, my heart threatening to burst from my chest. Slamming on the brakes, the tires screeched in protest as I desperately fought to regain control of my vehicle. But that Dogman was a relentless force, hell-bent on making me crash. Using hands far too human-looking for my comfort, the creature tried to open my passenger seat door and climb on in. I gunned the engine, surging forward at a speed that would have left any other living thing in the dust. But not that Dogman. It raced alongside my pickup like I was some jogging grandma. It didn't even seem to be working up a sweat as I accelerated to 30 and 40 miles per hour. With each passing second, it drew closer, bounding alongside my truck with uncanny speed. Saliva dripped from its snarling maw, its teeth looking as sharp as knives, ready to tear me apart. Panic threatened to overpower me, but I couldn't let fear consume me. Not again. Summoning every ounce of courage within me, I defied the Dogman's calculated pursuit. Turning the wheel with precision, I swerved and veered, narrowly avoiding its relentless advances. That truck shook and trembled under the strain, but I pressed on, determination fueling my resolve. At some point it seemed to have just had enough, and the Dogman retreated into the shadows, fading away into the night. There had been something deliberate about all of that, as if the beast somehow knew I would be coming that way, at that time, on that night. The world may dismiss the existence of such creatures, but at that point I knew the truth. And as I continued on, my eyes glued to the lonely road ahead, I vowed never to forget that encounter which had tested my very sanity. For in the depths of the wilderness, where the normal fades and the supernatural thrives, the feral Dogman remains an unforgiving reminder. There is more to this world than meets the eye, and for those who have witnessed its wrath, it's a chilling truth that's impossible to forget. So now we fast forward to when I had been living and working here for about 2 years. That was when I saw that pregnant lady Bigfoot, and I rescued her abandoned baby boy who I named Fenrir. Fen was not an easy child to raise. I couldn't bring him inside, but when I would tie him up out back, it was only a matter of time until he threw a crying and whining fit, making the absolute saddest sounds that you could ever imagine anyone or anything ever making. For the next half year, I lived most of the time in tents in my backyard, giving the baby attention, which he craved an awful lot of. I knew that what I was doing might cause the animal to bond to me, but I didn't see any other options open that would have been any better. If the authorities moved in, for instance, Fen would become their lab rat. I didn't see anything else to do but continue raising him, and then hope that when he got old enough to fend for himself, that he would voluntarily head out on his own to live in the wild again as it was meant to be. I was kind of disappointed to learn that Fen was not initially the most adventurous youngster. For one thing, he was afraid of thunderstorms and would beg to be let into the house. I kept a tarpaulin over the back porch so that he and I could sit there and watch the rainfall. How can a wild animal be afraid of rain? Especially one as big as Fen soon grew up into. Before he was even a year old, he was already larger than I was, but he needed comforting when there was a loud noise, and he would fall apart emotionally when something like a bee sting happened. No matter how large he became, he never took the aggressive stance with any animal that ever wandered into my backyard. I once saw a squirrel frighten him away. I'm not even exaggerating. I don't think I was a really very good father in that sense. I couldn't figure out how to prepare Fen for living on his own. And what else is a father's job besides that? I have no idea how fast or slow a Bigfoot Dogman hybrid is supposed to develop, but I'm pretty certain that my Fen is a late bloomer. That's just me going with my gut. I don't really have any other cryptid babies to compare him to. But at some point his hormones kicked in, and he just took off one day, not coming back for a few days. Then he left again, this time for a week or more. After that, he was gone for real. And I felt a sense of relief that I had done the right thing, even if I also missed him an awful lot. Every second he had been around, I was paranoid that I was going to get caught out. I did sleep much better once it was clear that my adopted progeny had left the nest. I thought our unique relationship was over permanently, but I was surprised when I got reacquainted with my old friend in his current, much larger form. He's so big now that a grizzly would look like a poodle next to him. Let me tell you about how we formed this new version of our friendship. It was a stormy summer evening. Rain pouring down relentlessly from the darkened sky. Thunder roared through the air, shaking the very foundation of my humble cabin. I huddled by the fireplace, seeking solace from the tempest, unaware of the inexplicable events soon to unfold. In the midst of the chaotic downpour, a peculiar sound caught my attention. At first it blended with the wailing wind, almost indistinguishable. But its uniqueness seized my curiosity, urging me to venture outside and unveil the source. Guided by an inexplicable intuition, I stumbled through the maze of towering trees toward the enigmatic noise. The rain soaked me to the bone, turning my clothes into a second skin. Yet I pressed on, driven by a force akin to madness. As I inched closer, trembling with both trepidation and excitement, the sound transformed into a haunting whine, resembling that of a dog's eerie howl. Goosebumps prickled my skin, and a mix of fear and awe coursed through me. And then, amid the torrential downpour and the cacophony of the tempest, I caught a glimpse of something. A large figure, obscured by the unforgiving rain, stood before me, towering and massive. It was unlike anything I had ever laid my eyes upon. The creature had the stature of a Bigfoot, yet its features were a peculiar hybrid. Its pointed ears, akin to a dog, were perched on either side of its head, which was adorned with shaggy fur. Its snout, elongated and prominent, stood out from the rest of its face, resembling that of a canid. I stared dumbfounded and mesmerized as it braved the storm with a constant vigilance. This was definitely a hybrid creature, like the one I had befriended and raised, but this one was so much larger than my friend Fen. Curiosity mingled with a strange empathy, prompting me to step forward rather than to run away. Inch by inch, we approached each other in the clearing, the rain blending with the pounding of my heart. The thunder suddenly intensified, unleashing a cataclysmic roar, and the hybrid creature recoiled, in fear, the same way little Fen had always done. Without thinking, I extended my hand outward, a silent gesture of reassurance to the apprehensive beast. It responded to my approach with a cautious curiosity, inching forward like a frightened little animal, and then trying to tuck his entire massive form under my armpit so that I could protect this incredibly powerful monster man from the big scary thunderstorm. And in that crazy moment, a connection reformed. This had to be Fen. This had to be him, in his fully grown adult form. Over time, our relationship evolved. Fenrir in adulthood proved to be gentle and kind-hearted, despite his intimidating size. We spent countless hours together, exploring the forest's secrets and learning from one another over the first few months of our reunion. Our friendship became my most treasured secret, a testament to the extraordinary bond that can exist between mankind and the unknown. For the most part, Fen is back to living on his own again, but thunderstorms are still his Achilles heel. When the sky unleashes its wrath, there's still around a 50-50 chance that he'll come seek refuge in my presence, overcome with fear, but looking for solace in the familiarity of our companionship. Together we've weathered a number of storms, offering each other a rare comfort, born of acceptance and deep-rooted trust. In the eyes of the world, our connection may appear unimaginable. It's a fanciful tale of the impossible for the small or closed-minded. It's an illegal friendship with a dangerous monster to some others. But I know the truth. In the heart of this forest, amid the towering trees and the violent thunderstorms, a deep bond between this man and a creature of legend was forged. And in that bond, we found an unbreakable friendship, defying the boundaries of reason and embracing the vast infinity of the unknown. Scary Werewolf is my friend. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I'm writing to complain to you about your terrible portrayal of the Dogman species on your channel. Yes, they do look scary, but they're big teddy bears. I've met a few of them, and I'm very good friends with one in particular. I am not an outdoors person. I am not a hunter. I am an office worker who walks through the woods to get to my bus for work. That's all I had to do to meet more than one Dogman, was to take a shortcut through the woods. The idea that these creatures are not officially in existence as far as science is concerned, well, that just goes to show that science is run by a bunch of men. All the women in my neighborhood know the Dogman is real. None of the men believe us, though. I suppose the men are just not interesting enough for these creatures to reveal themselves to. I like to call the one I am closest with Rex, because someone told me that means king. That's Rex. He's like king of the jungle. Except we don't have jungle this far north. We have forest. So I guess he's king of the forest. He's taller than the football players I used to date, and he's taller than the basketball player my sister used to date. Not that I want to date him, of course. That wouldn't really be possible since he's not a guy. At least I don't think he is. One of my girlfriends thinks that he's really a werewolf, but he's ugly in his human form, and that's why he only shows himself to me as a wolfman. I don't know, I think he's really some kind of a big doggy. He acts like a dog more than he acts like a man. Actually, now that I think about it, I guess dogs and men all act the same toward me. They're always super friendly, so I tend to like them back. I like ugly guys too, although I guess I have only dated athletic kinds of fellas. And popular guys too. But none of that ever got me anyplace anyway. My college is finished, I'm in debt, I've got no current boyfriend, and I'm working as a typist and a stenographer for hire in the city. My friends all either got cushy executive positions or husbands or both, and they all mostly work from home. Not me. I'm just lucky my fingers are nimble, and people still hire typists. To be honest, I think you can just scan it all in now. Like the computer or AI or something can do the typing for you. But my boss still prefers to hire young women to do it all manually. If he switches to AI, I might have to beg my old classmates for some kind of gig, I don't know. Sometimes I dream of just walking off into the woods with Rex, and being like that chick that used to hang out with Tarzan in that old movie my mother loves. Like I could just stay in a tree or something. I know it's not something that could really work, but that's my fantasy. The thing is, I do sort of still hope to find true love. I'm 26 and not getting younger, but it's too soon to give up and go live in a tree with a dog. Still, Rex is a very special dog, and he does have very strong arms. He gives off so much body heat, you would think he was a man. But of course he isn't. At least, I don't think so. Anyway, the reason I'm writing you is an important one. You've got to stop smearing Dogman creatures, saying they're all man-eating criminals or something. You tell these stories about them being creepy, spying on people, looking through windows, destroying people's sense of privacy in their own homes. First of all, I doubt any of these stories are even true. And second of all, if they are true, they certainly aren't being told from the perspective of the Dogman or Wolfman. Maybe he's looking through your window at 3 a.m. because he wants to play. Maybe he just wants to make friends. Maybe he just wants to get to know you, and for you to know him. I think that you're approaching these stories people send you from the point of view of a guy. Just because the Dogmen are so much larger and faster than you are, that automatically makes them bad. Like, the reason that I walk to and from my bus with Rex is not random. We didn't happen into that by chance. What happened was that one night I was walking home from the bus through the woods in the dark, and I broke a heel. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, I heard someone following me. It was this big guy who was able to run circles around me. He was laughing at me because I was limping. I asked him for help and he said sure. He'd help himself to my wallet. A real joker, you know? But anyway, he didn't get my wallet because that was when I met Rex for the first time. Rex came out of the woods super fast and mega loud, and then he chased that mugger guy off. I hope he had him for dinner, personally. Anyway, I was able to hobble home after that and soak my feet. The next day I went to work in sneakers because I was too hurting from the night before. On my way to work I almost fainted dead away when that big Dogman, the one who had chased the mugger off the night before, well, he jumped out of the woods like he had been waiting for me. And he walked me to the bus stop on his hind legs. It was very gallant. And yet, you know, he's a dog, so he drooled on my new sneakers. I was actually glad to see him, though. Even though it was bright sunlight, I found myself more scared to go back through those woods than I had expected to be. I mean, I was so tired and fed up coming home the night before that even though I had almost been mugged and then I'd seen a 7 or 8 foot tall Dogman, I mostly just wanted to soak my feet and go to bed when I got home. It was the next day when I started to feel upset about all of it. I'm not sure why, but sometimes it seems to take a while for stuff to sink in. I think I might have felt traumatized by lunchtime if that Dogman hadn't come out and walked me to the bus. So instead of it being a bad combination of things that happened to me, it turned into this exciting thing that happened to me. I had a new bodyguard, and he was kind of exotic. I told some of the other girls about it at the main office that day, and one of them told me that was a Wisconsin werewolf. I had been living in Wisconsin since I was 18, but I hadn't heard that term before, the Wisconsin werewolf. The girl who told me about the werewolf asked if she could come home with me and see it for herself. I didn't see why not. So that evening she took my bus home with me from work. Well, when we walked into the woods that night, there was not only Rex, but several other dogmen as well, and we got a special escort home the entire way. The two new ones would sometimes drop to all fours and lick our hands. It was scary at first because I thought they were going to bite my hands off, but they were being friendly. My work friend took out her cell phone to take a picture of the three creatures, but they all disappeared into the woods so fast, it was almost like they evaporated. I mean, it made us both gasp. That's how fast they left. Even after she put the camera away, they did not come back. I took the hint, and I've never tried to photograph any of them since that day. Not that I see multiple dogmen every week, because I don't. I see Rex. But if I bring a girlfriend with me, then Rex might bring a friend or two or three with him. An interesting thing about this is that they will adapt to whoever I have with me. When I walked the path with my mother one evening, Rex and another dogman appeared to us on all fours, and my mother never got an inkling that they were anything but large and friendly dogs. That clearly demonstrates an advanced kind of intelligence. They seem to understand the worldview of people and then adapt themselves to it. I've never seen people dislike them, because the dogmen seem to know what you like and they act accordingly. Unless you're a bad person, obviously. One time I heard someone breaking into my house downstairs and I called the police. While I was still on the phone with the dispatcher, I went down the stairs and got down to the first floor just in time to see Rex chasing a potential house robber away from one of my back windows. I told the dispatcher what I'd seen, but I just called Rex a dog. I didn't describe him in too much detail. The cops found the robber's toolkit, and in it was duct tape and other even scarier stuff I won't mention. Rex didn't just save me from getting robbed on that night. He saved me from a lot more. My life has vastly improved since I became friends with a dogman. I don't think it's fair that stories like mine are so rarely told. The dogmen I've met were all good boys and nice doggies. Rex is so well behaved that I would almost invite him inside my home if I weren't afraid of him going to the bathroom everywhere to mark his turf. Now, I'm not going to ignore the allegations I've heard. Supposedly a dogman humped a guy's leg just outside of my town. I say supposedly because the guy who is claiming this hates dogman. He has told me terrible things about dogman, and now he's making these unsupported claims. It seems kind of suspicious to me. Why is it only people predisposed to disliking werewolves and dogmen who level such outlandish charges at these big burly bears? I ask women throughout the Midwest to unite and support the dogman as it faces such opposition from a frightened and superstitious public. I once heard a guy on an old TV commercial say, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." And whenever I think of that old commercial, I think of the dogman. Because it's the fear of the dogman that frightens people, not the dogman itself. It's the ideas associated with the big furry guys that people are scared of. It's the reputation of being man-eating monsters. It's the unfounded accusations of being mean-spirited serial killers. If you go down the list of most reported dogmen encounters, you will find that most reported dogmen are not violent toward humans at all. If Bigfoot could somehow get a rep of being peaceful, then why not dogman? Are there a list of dogman attacks that are longer than the list of alleged Squatch attacks? I don't know any stories of dogman hurting anybody in my entire neighborhood, and I think I know over a dozen people who've seen or even interacted with these big old teddy bears. Now, sure, if it's as big as a bear and has claws and fangs, you do probably want to keep your pets or small children away from them. But what wild animal is that not true about? You don't let your kids play with seagulls, do you? Their wingspan is longer than a grown man, And they can easily poke your kid's eyeballs out. But do you run screaming from seagulls? Do you make horror movies about seagulls? I mean, well, other than that one. But other than that. So if seagulls can eat your eyeballs and not be called monsters, what is so bad about the Dogman? Well, my medication is wearing off, so it's time for me to end this email to you. Just know that Dogmen is no more dangerous than a grizzly bear or a mountain lion. And if they like your perfume, they usually aren't even that dangerous at all. So please take greater care not to smear the name of this noble species, or subspecies, or whatever they end up turning out to be. Dogmen are people too, you know. Real werewolf meets movie werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I played a werewolf one time in a low-budget horror film that I won't name. Not because of any legal reason, but just because they put it out under so many titles I can't even remember what it's called anymore. We were filming in Wisconsin of all places, but don't ask me where inside there. It was the woods, basically. I had to get up 2 hours before dawn for makeup, and I didn't usually get to sleep until 11 or 12 the night after. So I was zonked and out of it, almost the entire time I was on the set of that movie. It wasn't like I had anything better to do but work and sleep out there in the middle of this wet, swampy forest, though. There was nothing within walking distance, and I was too tired to walk anyway. I just worked, ate donuts, used the porta potty, and then went back to sleep in my trailer, which had its own bathroom as well. I tried not to use that one for reasons which would be too gross to repeat here. So anyway, the entire thing was like a psychedelic trip, both in good and bad ways. The werewolf costume was heavy and hot no matter what. It was built to have a very wide neck that went down to my belly button, and a head and chest piece that was like a hood that they would fasten over me. Once that was in place, one of the PAs would watch the time, and at 4 minutes 30, someone would run over to me and take the hood off. Then they would hose me down like I was an animal at the circus. But I loved it because it kept me alive and ticking on those super hot summer days. So one time they had one of the PAs lead me out into the woods and set me in a direction. When the order came over the walkie, all I had to do was walk straight forward. That was it. Eventually I would walk into the shot where they had the camera set up, I was told. I could barely see anything in that costume since I was looking out through tiny holes in the neck. So I heard the director call for action over the walkie, and the PA pushed me off in the direction I was supposed to walk. I entered into some foliage and was cut off both from the kid behind me and the camera crew somewhere in the dark in front. Now this is the point where something went wrong. The conventional explanation is that I wandered off course, but both earlier that day and later on I went over the area we were shooting at, and there really was no room for me to have turned off course. In my opinion, I walked into a different version of that forest, and I'm just lucky I walked back out of it again. But no matter whether I was lost in another dimension, or just lost in a weird little alcove of those woods, in either case, I was not alone when I got there. I looked up and I thought I was seeing my own reflection, and boy did I look surprised to see me, too. I couldn't understand what my image was reflecting off of, so I took a step closer, but my reflection took a step backward. I tried to take my giant wolf head off, but I remembered it was fastened, and then I started to have a panic attack. I was stuck inside that prosthetic Wolfman movie costume that I had to be out of in 4 minutes, or else I was going to pass out and possibly die. And there was some creature that looked just like my costume, standing in that hot forest blocking my way. I was wearing a werewolf costume, so if that creature looked like my costume, that meant that was a werewolf looking at me. And the more it looked, the less frightened it was of me. The more curious it became as well. Then the creature, the hairy bipedal man-like canine thing, it took a step toward me, and I turned around yelling for the PA to help with his voice that was disappointingly high-pitched and squeaky sounding. Now, I was at least turned around, if not lost, in a different reality, because when I came out of the leaves into the clearing, it was not the clearing I had left the PA in. It was the clearing the film crew was in, and they absolutely loved the energy I put into making my grand entrance. Then the director told me to go back and do it again more slowly, and I told him to take the mask off me. I got yelled at for costing the production money, but I needed to cool off and I needed to calm down. I also wanted to stall for time so that the werewolf would go back where he came from. I told a couple of people what I saw, and they claimed I was hallucinating and that we needed to get me to a hospital. I was fine though, I just needed to chill for a minute and get myself back in order before going back out there. This time I told them I would direct myself in the scene. I told them just to roll the camera. I had the PA take me to just the other side of my entrance point and then push me back in. I nailed it on the first take, and neither I nor the PA saw any real monsters that time around. Since I was fine for the rest of the night and the rest of the shoot, I really don't think I was exhausted or dehydrated or hallucinating when I saw that werewolf. I just think that he and I walked into the same neighborhood of the Twilight Zone, at the same time, on the same night, or something to that effect. How else can you explain real werewolf meets movie werewolf?
If you want a coloring book full of monstrous delight, then give this a look. It'll give you more fright, right? Scary stories, coloring book, werewolf coloring book. And just to make your mind explode, it's a digital download. All it costs is $2.09, and then you will be feeling fine. Coloring monsters today, hey, it's a coloring book, hooray. Okay, link is in the description.
Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.